Everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 136, and we are I'm used to the person repeating after me, but unfortunately, Brent is sick, and so he's not going to be with us today. But this is the podcast, if you're new with us, where we chase the truth wherever it runs, and our aim and goal is to basically talk about the subject brought up by the sermon here at Olive Branch Community Church on Sunday and kind of see where it goes. So for those of you who are new, my name is Greg Harris, the senior pastor here. I'm probably your senior pastor since you're watching this. If not, we're just glad you joined with us and you're checking out.
Did you want to watch it at all?
The information, yeah. So Stephan, why don't you say hi and let everybody know who you are and what's up.
Hi, my name is Stephan.
And the sky is up. Just kidding.
Yep. My name is Stephan Oldham. I'm the local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch, and we're just glad you're listening and watching at all. And so if you are, give us a like to this particular episode. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, and wherever you're watching, make sure you share this with your friends to let the people know about the podcast. Word of mouth is the best way because you know who would be interested in what we're saying more than anyone else if you're listening. So that's the best way we can spread the news.
Yeah, we also would love to have a dialogue. This is not a monologue by us, or you can listen to our conversation. We don't mind that.
Or not to be.
But we really enjoy when you actually converse with us by sending us your questions, your comments, or even your...
snarky McMarks.
Yeah, snarky McMarks. I like that.
Snarky McMarks.
Whatever they are, we'd love to hear from them. Send them to us through our email, which is rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and Stephan will kind of say what he's going to say about it. But we are just glad you're joining with us. And as we begin, we don't have any jokes because Brent was kind enough to not be here
We're not
today.
funny.
Woo! And yeah, I'm not a jokey guy.
Well, I can be, but I don't know if I should share the jokes, not because they're off color, but because they make people mad.
Or sad.
Or sad, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
They're kind of darker, funnier.
And my problem...
More sarcastic than I should be.
We were talking about doing our Peter series, going into Easter this year. And so we were just having way too much fun with all the dumb things Peter would do and say. And so we got some classic stories coming up and some ways of talking about it, but it was kind of fun. And I don't want to give up any of that fun stuff, so I'm not going to say any of them. But that's as close as I'm going to get to a joke because I can butcher a good joke. That's just kind of the reality of what I do. So.
I don't joke unless it's sarcastic.
Okay, well then let's go on to everybody else's jokes called the internet. I'm just kidding. See? They just butchered the joke.
There's nothing on the internet today.
Oh, man, we're just flopping at the beginning. Okay.
No, there's only one comment that says amen, and I amen your amen. So.
Amen, the amen.
So they're not all negative, but I have this thing where if they're really bad, they go to the front of the line, and if there's nothing else, then I'll comment on the good stuff, I guess.
Thanks, Stephan.
Yeah.
Way to not. When we remark to the good stuff, more good stuff comes our direction. So
now I think part of the good stuff is usually those people will tell me in person. And so the people that's bad, they're not going to do that if they see us next week on Sunday.
So do you have any good first impressions at your Bible study or anything?
First impressions on the Bible study? No.
From this podcast. But for all the men's Bible study out there who are listening, we say hi. How are you doing?
Men's group. Yeah, we have a men's Bible study every Thursday.
So all that being said, we're in a series then, as we're just going to pick up into our topic, since this was the most boring start we've ever had on the face of
we're on the planet Earth.
There's probably more boring starts.
Currently?
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what's a podcast planet look like? But that's
Planet Podcast. I'm sure there's a podcast called that.
I'm sure there is.
We're in the middle of your series, right?
Yeah, we are in the middle of the series.
Friends IRL in real life for all you older than 40.
I'm older than 40.
There you go. It's for you. You had somebody bring it up to you?
Yeah, it wasn't our creative meeting.
Yeah, no, this isn't the last in your series. Is there one more?
There's one more next week.
Okay, because I was like, this would be a sad one to end on.
Yeah, we're just going to end on losing friends.
Goodbye, friends. And wasn't that a great series? Like, aw.
I'm depressed. I tried to make all these friends, and now I have to lose them all. Yes.
I made a bunch of friends the first 3 sermons, and then the last sermon, I cut off half of them.
You want to make a dark joke right here, don't you, Stephan?
Yeah, I do.
Did you know in the end, you're all going to lose your friends?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not how that ends.
Unless you're a Christian, then you'll have better friendships in heaven.
Yes, which is a pretty awesome thing. I would love to get into that at some point too. But the all that said, we kind of covered a whole bunch of subjects. One of them very clearly being that we're talking about when you should cut off a friendship. I think a lot of people think that once I've made a friend, I can't like tell a person to stop being my friend, can I? And I think it's important to note that, there's times you really should tell a person that I don't think we can be friends anymore.
I don't think we live in a world where anyone wants anybody to think of them negatively. And I know people think, well, that's noble. And I'm like, well, you don't want people you don't want to give the impression that everyone likes you. That's a different reason but there's people that are not good that you don't want to like you. You wouldn't be like, I'm really, well, it's like school shooters, for instance.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
I don't make friends with school shooters because
I know somebody who does.
Yeah, I wouldn't seek to make friends with school. If they ended up being someone that I cared about, that's different, but that doesn't necessarily mean I want to seek them out and not have them think bad or good things about me. I'm not so concerned about their moral judgments, in so much as them trying to get them on my good side.
I'm not sure I want to make like intimate friends with a neo-Nazi.
Yeah, I'm not going to seek it out.
Racist, or make an intimate friend.
That doesn't mean I don't care about that person and that they should change or confronting them in a way that brings them to salvation. But I'm not going to be like, you know what? I'm friends with everybody. I think of everybody as equal, which is like saying I don't think of anybody as different from each other in the sense of I have things incompatible with the world.
Yeah, there are some pretty incredible people in this world who are able to make friends with people that I don't think I would probably be good at making friends with, like a neo-Nazi. In fact, what's his name? He's a black kind of activist who his way of doing it was literally, because he's a Christian, befriending people who are in the Ku Klux Klan and befriending them in such a manner they realize that all their viewpoints are faulty, and like he has like a garage full of Klan, like all kinds of Klan like clothing and stuff that they just bring over and give to him because they're like, I'm done.
Daryl Davis.
Yeah, Daryl. That's right.
I looked it up. That's how smart I am.
That was a really interesting. He's a really fascinating character. He's a person. He's had a documentary.
I remember the documentary.
I think you pointed me onto it.
Yeah. He was interesting. I don't know where he's at now, but I know in earlys he was really going around. But I don't think his goal was to go like, I'm going to make I think he humanized people. He went around and talking to them, I'm going to talk to these people. They're people and they're made in the image of God. I think I'll just chat with them and see where it goes.
But true friendship does humanize people. I think that's the critical thing. Is
you should humanize everybody, even your villainous enemies.
But when someone is dehumanizing you on, even though you're trying to connect with them, I think that's the time you need to start considering to really draw a line. Notice, even in the sermon, I wasn't trying to say, draw the line, because I think there are trigger-happy people in our world who are ready to just, I'm an introvert and I don't want any more friends. Done. Nobody else can. Pastor Greg said I don't need any more friends. Okay, I'm an introvert too. You still need some good, solid friends. But this also, like you were mentioning, kind of means we need to continue to remind ourselves what in the world does friend mean.
Just in clarifying our conversation, because that might be confusing. Like, well, I tried to make as many friends as possible. Well, that's a noble cause. I just think we're using friendship as a word that's not really well defined anymore. There's a difference between like close, true friends that you need in order to get through life, to share intimate things with, and just having casual acquaintances that you would call friends, because that's what everybody does in our colloquial culture. We use hey, I'm friends with the guy at the store. I only see him when I go to the store. But
my son Andrew's cute, right? He's that kind of guy who's like, when he was really little, he would come back and we're like, oh, well, how to go to school? I made so many friends. You're like, oh, wow, how? He's like, I was in line with these kids and we played, and then I played this game and I was over here and I played that game and with these kids. I'm like, do you know their names? No.
Nope. Yeah, Elijah does the same thing.
That's not your friends. Like, that's not how that works.
So there are degrees of friendships, right? So I would say, we're friendly. We have a friend, and I can even say to them, hey, buddy, or hey, pal, because we kind of throw it out there to be more friendly, to draw them in. So there's degrees of friendship is what we're saying. And when we're talking about the word friends in your sermon, I think what we're talking about are those close friends who really know you.
Yeah, you've opened your soul to. You've talked about dreams, desires, struggles, all these kinds of things. that if somebody was to ask, do you really know them? They'd say, yeah, I really know them.
Yeah, and so your besties, I guess, in colloquial phrases, these are your really true best friends.
Yeah, but maybe it seems weird that we would say, hey, there are some you got to cut off. But I think that when you become a Christian, there comes a point at times where old friends, at least for me, when I became a Christian, like I'm careful about this because I really think the most powerful evangelistic moments are when you've just come to faith and you're sharing it with your really close friends or your pals and your other groups. And that's when a lot of my friends, I introduced them to Christ. But shortly after that, when they started just like, no, don't want to. And then they were doing things I couldn't participate in. And it was kind of, my life went a different direction. I had to close it off because I was easily tempted to go join them in those sins, whether it would be, hey, let's go party or let's go, check out this place or whatever. There was I couldn't go there. I was too young in the faith. It was too dangerous. I wasn't capable of answering their questions. There was just all kinds of problems for me to keep those friends close. Now, I didn't cut them off. I just kind of like shifted them, if in a sense.
You kept them in the friends group as a close friends.
And that's where that problem comes in, right? Like, I've got these friends and we hang out, we talk at game nights or small group. Those are my close friends. And I think people think what a close friend isn't as close as I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Some people think they're being close when what I'm talking about is you're capable of telling them embarrassing realities of your life that you wouldn't want to share on the internet or with anybody, right? These people, you're risking something when you open those doors. If there is no risk in the conversations about like where you're really at and how you're really feeling, what you're really wrestling with, what's really going on in your mind, like those, you have close friends, but they're not that. I'm talking about the true friends. It's like a brother or a sister, true brotherhood. This, like something far more vulnerable and far more risky than just, hey, I got my golfing buddies, or I got my...
You can already tell how complex it is. Like in psychology, there are friendship groups. Now, I'm not friends with everybody in the group, but our group continually hangs out, and I enjoy the group as a whole. And then there are individuals in that group that I would consider friends, and then there are individuals that might be in that group that I would consider close friends. And there are different degrees. And so what we are talking about here is that even your friends in the friendship group that you casually hang out with can draw you away from the Lord and you may have to sever ties. That's when you're talking about alcoholism and things. Right. Part of the reason why people who get stuck in alcoholism isn't necessarily, it's just that it is hard for them to resist a temptation. And in a better circumstances, they would all be able to be better to each other. It doesn't mean they don't love each other. It just means when they're together, they do more harm to each other than good. And so some people have to close off their friendships, even close ones, because of the fact that they're not strong enough to resist, is what you're talking about. But even within close friendships, there are things that kind of interfere, that can get in the way, value shifts and changes, and then your worldviews shift, and those also often determine whether you can maintain a friendship with somebody. And then there are those relationships where you legally are obligated, like marriage.
Yeah, those are very
and
different.
Children.
You're going to fight for those. You're going to fight for that relationship in a very different way.
You have a legal and moral obligation to care for them on a material and emotional level that's required of you.
Yeah. Well, you've made the vow. You made the covenant.
Yeah.
You're in a very real way. You've already told God, I'm doing this no matter what. And then you got to have some very ridiculously strong reasons to go, okay, I can't do this.
Well, I'd say the same
possible.
for children, right? You don't abandon children if you have them or you create them. It's almost like a contract there as well.
I'm getting nervous that we're going to come up with some kind of situation where people are going to be like, hey, I want to return this child to the IVF place because this isn't what I signed up for. Because we're commodifying children so much.
Yeah.
That really scares me, because I do think there's going to be somebody who tries to just turn their kid over to the state and go like, I'm done.
Well, we can also do the opposite. So the idea of children being in your life was a bond between a loving relationship that was already there as well. So you have a friendship, a marriage, and a relationship that forges a new person. That's a whole other kind of a contract there. But now people are feeling like I have a right to children as a person, as a part of who I am. It doesn't matter whether I'm married or not.
Right.
And somehow they become like badges of honor. Like I deserve a child.
Which is, again, we're breaking these these relationships up because we don't have good bonds or boundaries. We don't have a true definition that embodies the concept. Like this is what's wrong with our language. When our language deteriorates, it disables the ability for us to know things. Like when we opened marriage up to, as we're doing, to where it's anything and everything that wants to be love is love, that literally is a tautology. That literally means nothing. You've said nothing when you say that. And therefore, you end up in a situation where, of course, love is love. What else can love be? But you're not saying love is marriage. I know a lot of marriages that are sticking it out that love has got to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
It's not there because of the damage that's been done. But guess what? By fighting for the marriage, they're showing a love that's not how I feel romantically, but they're saying this is something more substantial, which is why the words have to stay what they are. This is why we can't change the pronouns and all these different things around without causing massive inabilities to be clear. As Lewis would say, if you keep making everything opaque, you see through everything, and therefore you don't see anything. And that's really where we're getting to. It's just getting to this very difficult world where nothing can be understood as what it is. That's a computer. Oh no, it's a person because it has an AI. So if you have an AI system running on your computer, does that instantaneously make it a person? And then when you shut off the AI because you move off the website, does the computer cease to be a person at that point?
Well, even more than I see that people do this with animals. I see that people do this with computers. Once you take away the idea that something corresponds to a reality, then it really messes up all of your relationships. And so what I mean by that is if I think of my friends as commodities that give me value, that I get something, and that's the only concern that I have for friendship is what I get out of it, then I'm only going to be, they're only as valuable as what they do for me. And once they don't do what I want from me, then I have to disregard them because I become the center of the reality. That in truth is like a dog is a dog, and it has a certain matter of camaraderie that it can give you, but it can't replace certain human value, even though you embody a lot of value into a dog that it doesn't always has the capability to reciprocate. It does have the function to reciprocate, but it's not going to be the same as a friend or a person will, and that's okay. But if you also do this with people, where you don't think of them as an objective, created in the image of God, having a design and a purpose and how friendship should work, whether you're involved in the friendship or not, just in general, then you're going to have to create whatever reality makes you feel good. And your own feelings are always going to be circumspect to whether they're true or not. It's like people go, well, people get famous and they go, now everybody's going to love me. And everyone around them is like, yes, sir. Yes. What do you want? Yes. And then they have this big house and they have more friends and they don't ever feel loved because why? It's because everyone wants what I have. They don't want to know who I am. They want what they want from me. And if you're an actor, that makes it even more confusing. Yeah. Because now you're like, who am I? And then it's this idea that I want a real friendship. Well, what is that? It would be a give and take reality that has an objective measure. So a true objective measure would be someone that knows your flaws but still invested in being your friendship, but also you know theirs and you're on their side, but also you pursue something that's good. You have to have similar values. So when we talk about an objective measure, I want people to think of it as your cookie cutter. Like when you take a cookie cutter and you take the Reef cookie cutter or the Halloween, pumpkin cookie cutter and you hit it in there, you're not making something else. You're not like, oh, look, I put a pumpkin cookie and now I'm calling it a bat. It's like, no, that's not the bat cookie cutter. You tell your kids that's the pumpkin. This is the bat. And that's the idea, that there is an actual definition, an objective outside of us, real healthy, thing we used to that call it is. Yeah. It is a real thing that a friend is. And so, yeah, there are close friends, but I'm saying the friend I'm talking about needs to be defined in that sense, like I've been saying, that they fully know you and they still love you, that they're not rejecting you in the things that you think are rejectable about yourself, and that you're expressing those things that you fear are rejectable about yourself. Now, you may do that at certain levels, but not fully with somebody who's gotten so much of that. And I think that there's a maturity that you will grow in as a friend as you open those doors,
as you keep those doors closed, you are limiting the development of that relationship, whether it's a friendship or a marriage or a brother-sister relationship. The more you keep those doors closed, the further you will go from each other, because you can't truly know each other. You only know the actions of each other, or you only know the expressions of the person. There has to be something beyond the activity. There has to be something beyond the expression.
Or even beyond the feelings. This is the third component that I think needs to be added. So there are people that are morally poor in their choices. They do bad, harmful things to society, to themselves, and to others. You can find a friend that joins you in on that chaos. And so one of the things that needs to be added is goodness.
Well,
what is good, right?
Which is why we have to define the word love. Jesus isn't saying, hey, you both are out for the same evil. No, you're out for the good of each other. And that's why when we get to this, what's harmful when that word's gone? When the good, which we need to really clearly define in our culture again, that which God loves, which is what is the good. What God determines is right and healthy and wholesome for his creation. That's the good. When that is abandoned, now you've got somebody who's it's harmful. It's a relationship that could be
just knowing in psychology, people are attracted to people. Some for romantic, some for friendships. People feel like, well, it's just natural because it's my natural inclination, so it must be good. And I'm like, man, you would save a lot of therapy bills if you didn't assume that was true. You know what I mean? Because the truth is we all have what I call weirdo magnets.
Yeah, Teresa likes to say, your picker's broken. Yeah. You should never pick again. Like
you need help picking, and then you're not attracted to, it's like I'm attracted to things that are bad. You know, in other words, that's a possibility in my registrar that I have an attraction. I'm not denying that. Oh, that's bad. I don't really feel that. That would be opposite of a problem for you. You're denying reality. But in that attraction, that there may be a faulty cause for my attraction. So when I was younger, I used to like to rescue people. You know, it's just kind of being in ministry and being in therapy. You have to watch this kind of need to care for people being both positive and negative, right? And the positive, you want people to get better and be restored to God's way for their life. In the negative, it's like you almost take God's place and want to rescue people that don't want to be rescued. They don't have any inclination to it. They don't want to. They see themselves as fine. And you think, well, it's clearly obvious to everyone else that you need help, but I was attracted to that. There's a physiological response. There's a chemical reaction. I liked being around that. After a while, I started to realize why, and it was because of that I hadn't dealt with those issues in my life. And once you start dealing with those issues, you have to have an objective measure to point them out. In other words, for me, it was scripture. Like you need to practice liking things that are good for you, just as much as and eventually what ends up happening is you start to feel those feelings, the appropriate ones for something healthy. And I realized this mostly from dieting, you know, just like, and I'm still trying to struggle with it back and forth in life, but in the sense that I didn't like bitters because I burnt my taste buds out on sugar. Mm-hmm. Everything I ate had so much sugar in it that nothing tasted sweet unless it was super sweet.
Or you can't take a sour, or you can't.
Yeah, I couldn't take a bitter because it was so negative to my emotions, my response, my physiological response. And what I realized is if I cut sugar out, then when I ate a banana, it tasted like a banana was supposed to taste. It was super good. And it just became
super sweet.
And super sweet. And then I didn't realize I had done that to myself. Now I'm just following my appetite. And my appetite's telling me I need to eat for life to sustain, and I think that's a good measure of how friendship works. You are attracted to things, but I being from the bad side of town and being told for a long time, oh, you're a bad person, or whatever, I didn't think of myself, but I kept attracting the darker, badder, rejected people. Some of that's great. Sometimes it's just you being around bad people.
That's all you've got selection
because that's all you have selected for you, and some of them are really legitimately bad. And you have to have the ability to know, like, this is harmful to me. This isn't going to help me pursue goodness in my life. If two of us have been rejected and we both pursue goodness, great friendship, deep, meaningful. But if you both are just like, you know what, I don't care about life. I'm going to fight back against society and be rebellious. That's how I feel. Now we have a chemical reaction for being two bad people inspiring each other on.
So I feel kind of guilty as a pastor that we're only finally hitting how to make friends and stuff as a cult in our church now. When you stop and think about it, I think a lot of churches are filled with people who gravitate to church in some ways because that's what they've always done. It's safe. They feel like safe people, but they've never because we grow up in a world that doesn't know how to have friendships.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do, even in a church setting. And there's some wonky things that are going on in this series. I've watched people like try to find out if somebody else is a friend in a public setting, and I'm like, that's probably not the right time to do that. If you're going to find out if you've got a friend, do it in a private setting. Make that commitment in a private setting. Even Jonathan sent the guy away with the arrow before he made sure that things were good.
David.
Yeah, with David. And the point is that there are some cases that there are other people who are just like, oh, no, I got to let go of all this group now because I made a friend. And it's like, no. You don't have, like, we really don't know how to do this. And I've been kind of amazed, and that's not a mean thing to our church or anything. I think this is where we're at as Americans.
Society is.
And I find myself doing some of this stuff where it's like, I don't really want to go, I don't have time, or like I'm going to beat myself up on this next sermon, but next week. But it's this like, oh my gosh, like this is hard. This isn't this. There's so much.
We made it harder
here,
than it used to be.
Yeah, and some of that was like a question I wanted to tack to, which is like, how do you think proximity? Because I have my opinions on this, but proximity. Would you agree with me? Has ruined because of the way that we built our world, the way that we've got suburbs where honestly I love how one guy said, I was listening to a podcast with Jonathan Pajot or something like that. And he was like,
the Greek Orthodox dude.
Is he? Okay. I don't know. But
he's friends with Peterson.
Yeah. So he speaks about like this idea.
Pretty interesting philosophy
of the suburb as like it's a meaningless gathering of houses because we didn't shape it.
Yeah, you didn't shape it around a park or anything.
Around a focus, a central focus or purpose.
Like Main Streets used to be.
Right. Like in Corona, one of the reasons I think Corona feels like a small town when you're in Corona is because there is still this main area. It's still a small town. You can practically walk to the city hall if you wanted to. Now, the further away you get from that, the less that feels true anymore. Like 6th Street feels way far away or whatever.
Well, we have Grand here. Grand was a racetrack, and so a lot of people came to Corona because of the racetrack, and it's still the center.
And the Orange Groves. Those are the two focuses.
But it's still the center of the town in many ways symbolically.
But then we chopped down the purpose here in Corona.
We chopped down all the orange groves, sadly.
And we put in all of, but we don't. And so what are we? What's our purpose? We don't have one. We are commuters.
Well, we got rid of our old town too. We used to have an old town off of Main Street.
They're working on rebuilding it.
They're trying to rebuild it, but it's like
we'll see what happens.
Temecula became more of a boom town, and this is relevant because they thought, you know what? People have lived here for a long time. Let's build up the thing that brought people here in the first place, which is our old town. And now people want to experience an old town. They have to drive to Temecula to
45 minutes to go to a really kind of and it's interesting.
Quaint.
We were actually there the other night, and the problem is that it's really got this cool thing, but still
kind of commercially.
We walked down the streets, and you felt lonely. There were all these people doing all this stuff, but you know what? If you weren't willing to go get drunk, if you weren't willing to go into the bar, it just felt lonely.
Well, you'll see at Christmas time, though, they'll put out the ice skating there, and people will go and ice skate.
Because the centralized purpose is something greater than let's go dance and get drunk, which, secular people, that's a great thing but for them. But I think what's beautiful is like, move close to your church.
Yeah.
Get closer to your community. That's easier said than done. We're in California. You ain't moving anywhere.
Well, now that we've cut all these spaces out and these opportunities out for convenience, we have to go a long way to rebuild them now. Unfortunately,
we are the generation that has to rebuild these purposes. Yeah. And so all that being said, that proximity and friendship then are actually our ability to build friends is being decimated at every turn. We live in these purposeless suburbs where we don't have a commonality except for the name, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's just really weird. It's like Europe isn't like this in many ways. There are many bad things about Europe, but one of the coolest things about Europe is the plaza or the playa. The idea that there's a flat plain of places where people just go and gather around because that's what you've done and that's what they do. And there's a lot of cafes, and what you would do is you pay for the table, and then you just sit there and talk and watch people and see families and interact. And I'm like, this is really nice as far as like what I've seen. I haven't been able to go to Europe, but just that's been going on for centuries, and they haven't lost that in every place.
And then here's my thing. I'm living out in Sycamore Creek. Wonderful, gorgeous place. I love Sycamore Creek. I love where I live. And unfortunately, but there's no purpose to live there. except that it was a nice place. It's beautiful. It's up next to mountains. It's cheap. We've got a park. And so, yeah, the county tries to come in and do events at the park to try to get us all together. And they do it like once in a great while. And the HOA does events. And praise God, the HOA is doing events. I'm not here to knock that.
Wait, what?
I actually said that out of my mouth.
Wow, you said that out of your mouth.
I know. Ugh, I need to go brush my teeth. But the idea is, here's the thing. It's still hollow. It isn't like a gathering at a church. It's manufactured. They're trying to figure out what would be fun for people to do. Less manufactured is the Vons. Everybody goes down to Vons because you got to get food. Everybody goes down to the coffee shop, and everybody goes because you want to go get something, and that's the only one there. And so you're kind of like that becomes a bit more of the center than the HOA. And so, but you only got to go there once in a while. And so there's this kind of weird disconnect. And then add to that every single building in my community has probably upwards to 3 or 4 televisions in it and computers. And you've got the world at your fingertips. And so, no, you're not you got them in your cars, for goodness sakes. No, you're not even going to necessarily have a reason to go to a central place anymore with a central commitment, and therefore friendship is so difficult to build. I was talking to a couple of people who were like basically telling me that when they leave their work, they've lost all their friends.
Yeah, I mean
that's because it was the only place you had in your life that was you were central. You were on the same mission.
That's also
together.
where you've spent most of your time, other than your car.
Which is why I want to challenge. I think I need to challenge Olive Branch. I think we need to challenge ourselves. And I think Christians who are listening need to challenge. And non-Christians, you really should go to churches. You need to go to church. I mean, just
to build up community.
Just to have a place where you can meet a people focused around the same central vision and see what you're missing. Like, I don't even think people see what they're missing. I think this is why drug culture is a culture. I think that's why subcultures exist.
Well, that's what makes them popular is I'm feeling bad and I need to feel good, and other people are on the outskirts of society, so they have the same need I do, so I'm going to go get my need filled. And once that need is gone, you lose your connection. So sadly, that's not a good thing, but...
Right.
Church shouldn't be like that, though.
No, and I would say that's why you can't say I'm too busy with this sports thing or I'm too busy with this other thing, that we should be filling this place up. Like, we should be giving keys out to our congregation so that they can have a central place where we can come and be a body together. I think this has been your vision for years. It's been my wife's vision for years. One of the reasons the coffee shop to me that we're building is so critical is because I want to eventually have a place that would be, and it's not going to be open very often yet, but I would like it to be a place that becomes for Olive Branch, like, hey, where do you want to meet? Let's go down to the church. It's open. We can meet down. We can get a room and we can play the games there. Or, hey, we can bring our beanbag chairs, whatever. Or we'll sit outside in the patio and we'll sit under the lights. They're on. They're put out there. They've got things like they'll have some things out. I mean, it would be so cool if people just showed up with their lawn, their lawn games, and we're just like, well, we're here. We brought our barbecues, or it's like a park, but it has so much more purpose to it. It becomes a center place. It's why churches were oftentimes, along with the town hall, the center of towns in the East Coast. And
it's still like that in like Mexico. If you drive through towns, everybody's kind of hanging out at the park. If you're in some of the smaller towns with the capability of having a park, but like in South America, again, parks and plazas and things like that are important. But also just we don't think that way. Even now, like I remember during COVID or even before COVID, people would just hang out at bookstores because they have a coffee house. And what happened is those people weren't buying anything. So the stores took out all of the chairs from inside.
We walked in and we're like,
yeah. And they thought that was going to be a good business model for them because it gets out all the riffraff. But it no longer is a place where you talk to, hey, let's just go hang out at the bookstore, and casually people will buy things. It made it less welcoming because they just want you to buy a book and get out. So the impression they got was, you don't really care about me. You created this space for people to gather, but then when they gathered and didn't do what you wanted, you kick them away. And that's why Starbucks is very popular, because that's basically their model, is to create a third place for people
And they
to
have
bring their
they've even
friends.
backed away from that model.
They
in a
did
lot
during
of places.
COVID. Everybody did, and that isn't the model that they kind of currently are operating under. It seems like, but there is no place for third places, which are places to just gather.
Well,
Even when you go to a restaurant, you feel very guilty if you sit longer than your meals there, because we got to turn around this table. We got to make some more money, and you're
Oh
like,
yeah, it's so the pressure is so high.
get out of my restaurant. I need to.
And
make
this
money.
is where it's like, man, what if churches just brought tables? Like you didn't even think. You're just like, yeah, we're gonna bring a table with us. We're gonna set it up. We're gonna play games at the church, and whoever shows up, we're gonna play. We're gonna hang out. Hey, there's the coffee shops can be open. There's gonna be lights. Hey, there's a guy playing music, and it's an open mic night, and you can share your poetry. You can tell your story. You can, do these things, and it's like, wow, but it's all centered around Jesus and all centered around the focus. And it's clear, like, we're here for Jesus. We're not here to listen to your body nasty poetry. We're here, or your ridiculous song that is all about disgusting things. No, we want to keep it wholesome, and we want to keep it God-centered, and we want to keep it focused on Him. And we want to have this place that is on purpose. We're gathered here on purpose.
Part of the reason why the series is important is because you're thinking, how does this have to do with friendship? So it's like, you need the greatest number of communities interacting and acting normal in order to find out which one of these individuals you're compatible with enough to get close to.
Right. I think the best way to put it is, what does this have to do with friendship? The same thing that a flower bed has to do with flowers.
Yeah.
If you're going to grow flowers, you got to have a good, solid flower bed filled with good soil and getting watered, and that's critical. And so, but what I'm saying is we've poisoned the flower bed so that, guess what? We're not making friendships.
Once you sell all the flowers off, there's no more flowers. You have to generate them from somewhere else.
Yeah. So this is a work larger than just knowing the mechanics of how to build a friendship.
Well, also churches haven't helped with the idea of we sometimes make events that are so good that no one feels like they can contribute. You got it all figured out. So they either join your committee or they just participate. And it used to be like, we want to eat. And we're like, well, you bring some food, and then you bring some food, and then I'll just bring whatever. And then, because I think people in California particularly, they're looking for a good, solid experience, because they have so many
Well, you go to Disneyland,
quality experiences that you can have here. Where I remember in New Mexico, it was like, if someone just brought chips and really bad queso, whatever that stuff is that's supposed to be cheese, people would be all happy because they just didn't have anything. And so it was just kind of like they made it into the thing they wanted. Someone else go, well, if you bring that, I'll bring tamales. So I'm like, now we're eating real food. So it just became like, if everyone participated like a friendship group, instead of like a smorgasbord at your favorite, like, Golden Corral, everything has to be laid out and labeled. And it's just like, hey, Bob, you brought that. Is it gluten? Cool. Or because you know each other, right?
Right.
And so one is more an experience that you're hoping to have, and another one is one that you're trying
community that you're being involved
trying to
in.
build. Yeah. And so I think for us as a church, we have to learn to let go of the polished look and let it be unpolished. And then for the audience, or the quote unquote audience, for those that would like to participate, they would have to fill in those gaps for us so that they can feel like they're contributing. And I think that's helpful. We've tried to do that here. We're starting the process of having places we're just gathering for no apparent reason, just because we like each other. Yeah, potlucks. We're gonna bring food and just hang out. Is that okay? Well, why are you doing that? Just cause? Well, but why? Is there gonna be like a prayer meeting? Is there gonna be a guest speaker? It's like, no, we just want to hang out. Well, I got other things to do, right? So
I'm super excited because this weekend, one of the things we're doing is we're putting up, we had name tags on last weekend.
Yeah, I didn't know how that was going to go.
Loved it.
But the only reason I think it worked is because the name tag had a prompt on it.
Yeah, no, I don't even if that was the case, you know what I loved about it? I could pray for somebody and not worry about whether I remembered their name. I could greet somebody and I didn't have to actually say, hey, what's your name? I could just go, hey, John, or hey, Bill, hey, Amanda.
Created more intimate space.
Boom. It's immediate. I don't have to worry about all the other shenanigans of like, what's up, buddy?
But
hey,
I do think, though, people need prompts because we live in a world that's like, I don't want to bother anyone. But the thing says, ask me the question about my week. And you're now I have...
Just need to be a little bit bigger. Just kidding.
Well, and the thing about it is I pointed out, I just walked up to someone like, I want to read your question. They didn't even know they had a question, but it allowed me to open up it's just an icebreaker that doesn't seem unnatural.
Oh, it was great.
So it's just like really nice to be like, hey, what was the thing you liked
and
the
then
most?
add to that you would, so you're wearing a name tag, and then so people get to know you, and you're talking, you're hanging out. And then this week, I want you guys to do, if you're a Rabbit Trail listener, start us off. Let's do this together. You have interests that you like. You might love fishing. You might love running. You might be into game. We are into games. We're not talking about like
Board
Monopoly.
Games.
We're talking about hobby games, like super serious, like
real games. But then marrow trash.
But then marrow trash. And,
they call it.
But then there's some of you are like, you love chess. Maybe you like Go. Maybe you're into music and you like orchestral music and play the violin. And you're like, oh, is anybody else around here? Like, I'm still trying to learn the violin. I like orchestral music. I would rather listen to John Williams any day of the week than anything else. So it's like, this is good stuff. But the point is, if you have an interest, think about it for 5 seconds, write it down, and bring it with you this weekend, because we're going to post people's interest as an opportunity to jump into an interest group. And we're not saying as a church we're going to run it, but somebody, and maybe it's you Rabbit Trail people, are going to say, I will be willing to share this interest. And guess what? If somebody out there is like me and wants to write and likes writing stuff, and you want to share our writing pieces, I would love somebody to start an author's writing group. I would love a published author to be in our church to help us find out, how do we go from here? That kind of, if you like playwright and doing that kind of stuff, Stephen would love to meet you and have a workshop of writing plays and doing stuff like that, because there's these other interests that are going on in our church. And that's the beginning of taking that soil of the church and tilling it up and bringing some nutrition back into it. And I promise you, applying the principles of this series to a bed of just healthy community will produce the deepest relationships. It will produce fast friends, just fastened friends.
It'll give you the greatest opportunity to do so.
And so let's do this. We are already all of community together, as we've done stuff together, and I love hearing from you guys.
Rabbit Trail community.
And so the Rabbit Trail community out there, let's get noisier. Let's get noisier. Send us a shout out, or just make up your joke and send it to Brent. See if you can get him to. See if you can get me to laugh. I think that's a good idea. Just kidding, but I just love that we have a community of some kind here that is a starting space as well, because we see you, we hear you, we run into you, and it's fun. It's kind of like we got this secret code, because you got your pen and I got my pen. Secret decoder pens. I'm gonna wear my pen on this Sunday if you help me remember. So
your secret decoder pen?
Yeah, not my Rabbit Trail pen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought you had a secret decoder pen.
I'll wear it on
Sunday.
I want
to see that.
So, but we should do secret decoder pens. We'll send everybody a little secret secret code.
I have as an introverted social tolerance level pen that tells me what level of people have reached and what not, how I'm feeling about being around people.
Is it adjustable?
Yeah, you adjust it back and forth. I only wear that with certain people because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Mine would be down on the bottom all the time.
It's like I bought it because it's funny, because it's just like you move it up if you want to hang out, and you move it down if you don't.
I so wish you had shown me that. I could have used that in the sermon so bad. That would have been awesome. Now, all of this is to say that even say that community gets tilled up and it starts growing, it starts being beautiful, it starts being fresh, you're going to realize that some of the people you brought along with you aren't healthy, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy for you. And so you want to go through that process. And I love the Matthew 18 process, because it cares about the person. It doesn't care about the process. It cares that you're trying to, the best way to cut off a relationship is by trying to save the relationship. It has to really have died before you cut it off. And I think that's a good gardening concept, right? You don't cut it off unless you're going to put it in a vase of flowers, which is the slow death. Your job is to let something you can rehab it before you go and throw it out.
Yeah. Again, this has to do with, I really think you're going to really struggle with this if your worldview has a little bit too much of something that doesn't believe in reality. Because even in therapy, they're struggling with this right now. Whereas if something's harmful, there has to be a good and a bad. because you don't have harmful things. You just reinvent what they are to you. Well, it seems harmful, but really it's not. Just look at it a different way. I was like, no, it's either really harmful or it's not.
This poison is just a bitter, slow way to...
And so if you don't know what a healthy friendship worldview is, a worldview based on God, what God did for us, and so we should mirror that to other people, how we treat other people, we should treat them as the way Christ treated people. And if you don't have that as a measure, or at least something of value that has good, you probably don't know why you're attracted to your friendships, and you don't know if they're good for you. You don't even know the harm. I think you can feel it sometimes, but I don't think you know what a healthy relationship is. I think even in the church we struggle with, we just come to our faith. A lot of people don't know what healthy looks like. They're learning that while they're here at church. They're trying to figure it out. And typically people are loyal, but they don't even know what they're loyal to, because in families, you can't always kick out people in your life that are harmful to you, or how to put them in the right perspectives. And then familiarity just means like, well, I know what I have, so I don't know what I would have if I let it go. And so that's why one of your sermon points was, if you make most of your time dealing with someone who is not interested in growing, they're not interested in being good, they're not interested in how you feel, they're not interested in God, they're not interested in anything of value, and yet they're only interested in taking advantage of you, then they're taking up a space in your life that someone else is meant to be a part of and take the blessing.
There's so much more to life ready for you, available to you. Now, again, we're not talking that most people immediately, I hate to say this, instantaneously start thinking their spouse. They start going to the marriage concept. And it's like, that's a different relationship. This is friendship.
It is, but I would say if you're trying to solve that problem on your own, you're not gonna.
No, you're not.
And so that's professional help that you need to seek for that kind of relationship. Same with your children.
But do you know how many people have said, and how many counselors have said, if friendships were stronger, you wouldn't need as many counselors, and you wouldn't have as many divorces, because as Tressa said when she was here,
you pay for your friends when you go to counseling sometimes.
Yeah, you really do. She's adamant that we need to form better single people so we can have a better marriages.
Well, that's really, working both single and the other side of singleness, and working with married couples as well, I have really seen that what married couples are dealing with are things that they didn't deal with when they were single.
Right.
And
exactly.
I just see it. I go, well, you thought marriage was going to cover your inability to feel like you're lonely or something, and
you thought it was going to change your.
You had no boundaries when you were single.
Person.
You have no boundaries now that you're married. You thought it would solve your need for having to hide behind a problem, and oftentimes now you have someone. You have marriage. You look at it as a get out of jail free card. In other words, you have to support me. I can do whatever I want to you because you have to be there for me. And now you're trying to cure your abandonment issues with a marriage covenant contract. And I'm like, that's really not healthy.
You really needed a friend. This is why cohabitation is so deadly. It destroys both. It kills both. Yeah. If you're cohabiting, somebody who's cohabiting, the reason divorce levels are so high with people who cohabit is because they've destroyed both a friendship and a marriage. It's a nothing. It's a halfway point.
It's the worst of both worlds, not the best.
And so therefore, it's like either get married, make the commitment, and fight for the health, or just be. If you have kids, get married. If you don't have kids, get into a friendship. Get away. Get friends. Get lots of friends. Good, healthy friends. Because what you're doing is oftentimes just substituting what is really supposed to be an intimate friendship for a friends with benefits package that you want to pretend is a marriage, but you should just get married.
And the thing about being in proximity to that close to somebody is, by nature of human beings, if they live in the same space, they end up forming a kind of a bond anyway, but you have no legal contract or any emotional boundaries to that. So just like if two people hung out long enough, they're going to form some kind of a bond. It's just not going to be the healthy one that's been regulated by a community. Again, I do think healthy marriages revolve around communities. The reason why you go to a marriage or wedding is everyone is confirming that they're going to support your marriage, and because if you get divorced, they have to support it anyway. Divorce affects the economy, it affects the community, it affects the relationships. Everyone else has
the soil that
the family, the friendships,
from.
the children.
Because a broken relationship at the core, like a marriage for kids, they oftentimes have trouble knowing, can I trust? They have trust. They begin to have trust issues that builds friendship issues, which builds marriage issues. It just recapitulates itself. And so you have to be careful. Sometimes
I would
people go,
you.
the kids will be fine. No, the evidence is saying the kids are not fine.
Sometimes familiarity breeds contentment. And if you have a lot of people in your close proximity, you have to ask yourself, am I taking advantage of the fact that they're just here and they can't leave? Mm-hmm. Am I really a friend to them? And are they really a friend to me only because we're in proximity? And so there's a little bit of the fact that you can have camaraderie with a lot of people, but to really meet true friendships, the objective good, you have to have each other's best interests at heart and have honest conversations. And in order to get close to people in life, you have to take risks and you have to work out through problems and stuff as well. So do that now before you get married, because it will teach you, like, well, that's a boundary I have.
And if you've been divorced, work that out. Work through the lament process, work through the mourning, work through that stuff, and
where did the break in the covenant of the two going in one direction start becoming about focused on the self?
Yeah, and then go into the process of, where is my friendship meter broken? Like, how am I supposed to, like, I don't know too many like divorced people who have a lot of friends.
It'd be more common for the girl in the relationship to have a better support system than the man. Usually the man isolates even farther through a divorce. You might have one friend that you go hang out with because he's supporting your position. But what worries me is that the reason why people ask me, like, why would a counselor or therapist who's single want to counsel people on marriage, is like, it really helps everything. It helps every part of society if you stay married, because you have kids and you have family and you're part of the church, and I care about you. So it's like,
what I'm hoping this friendship series also reveals that there's not a fundamental practice that is different outside of sex in the marriage. There's two major differences between a marriage and a friendship. None of them are functional except for sex. And the other thing is the covenant. The covenant is a life covenant. And it produces a family. It is a bonding of two humans to produce new humans. And that's what family is. A family is a human producing covenant. It's a life producing covenant in the sense of like biological life producing covenant. A friendship is a life covenant. It produces life, but it produces a spiritual brotherhood, a life. It's part of the spiritual life that Jesus has brought within us. And so one is of the beginning covenant, the creation covenant, and therefore will be done away with. The other is the eternal covenant. Friendship is the higher covenant in the sense that it will last forever, and is the one that the marriage covenant sits within. If we cannot get the functions of friendship correctly, I guarantee you're struggling in your marriage. That functions of friendship actually should be the very things that make the functions of marriage work. That's why single people like Jesus and Paul can tell married people what those functions look like and how they work. They're not going to give you sex advice. There's no sex advice in the Bible. I mean, Solomon does in like the book of the Song of Solomon, and he kind of knew something about that subject. I don't really want to get that far into it.
But even then, it's usually about greedy or being selfish or being focused on one's own gratification of another.
But when it comes to the functions of basic friend relationships, we need to stop assuming that, marriage is the real place that these... I hope you get those things work better before you get
The biggest problem is we've taken every form of intimacy and put it in the marriage relationship. Or
in the church we have. Outside of the church, they put it
into the sexual relationships. The most valuable, intimate relationship you can have with the person, whether it's secular or Christian, is the one and deals with sex. Unfortunately, that rules out friendships. And they are different. I'm not saying that the bonds are the same, but they're not less significant in many ways that are needed for human flourishing.
Which is why
you need friends as much as you need a spouse. Is what I'm saying. Is you need a spouse. You don't have to have one. You need friends. You don't have to have those either, really.
But yeah, you do. I actually think you don't need a spouse.
Yeah.
But the society needs spouses.
You don't need everyone to be your friend.
But you need friends.
Yeah, you do. That's true.
You need friends. You cannot, that's the weird thing.
We
think weird, you need a spouse. You don't really need. No, you need the Bible.
You need friends.
You need friends.
Yeah.
God had friends while he walked on earth. He didn't have a spouse. You don't need the spouse. You need the friends. And that's a guy who's very happily married, saying this. But, and I do think if you have a spouse, they should be your friend.
Well, I would say the healthiest relationships I've seen within the church and marriages are the ones that have both the male and the female have healthy friendships as well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty and the thing that my wife brought into my life, clarified. I mean, I was pretty decent at friendships even before we met, but she just took it to the next level. She's still she's a pro. I'm an amateur, but we're still figuring it out. So.
I've just tons of my friends from the Air Force and from the singles ministry have gotten married, and I would say that I would probably, if my friendship with their spouse has contributed positively to their marriage, if they really could say, because they needed to talk to me and they needed someone to point them back at their marriage and tell them, well, this is why you did that in the first place, wasn't it? Is this how you felt about them in the first place, or is this what God would have you do? I'm only going to point you towards God. I'm not going to point. If I'm truly your spouse's best friend or good friend or close friend, I'm going to point them towards God. And isn't that going to be better for you? So if you're one of those people on the I've seen it on males and females that is jealous of the attention that your spouse gets from anyone else, even when it's healthy, then there's something wrong with yourself as well that you need to actually be okay with, because you're ruling out the church is really what you're doing. You're saying, I'm the only church you need.
Well, and then you rule out the idea that God can be the real one who gives, that you're becoming God.
Or they're becoming your God, or you're becoming
You're
their
not
God.
expecting intimacy, you're expecting worship.
Yeah.
And those are very different things. And that's a distinction that has to be made. If you're looking to be worshiped by your spouse, you're going to have problems. You're looking for intimacy. Intimacy is shared. You need to share out intimacy. Sexual intimacy, you don't share.
Right.
But relational intimacy must be shared. There's too much of you as an eternal being to share with one other human in its totality, because we're fallen. There's this beauty that's going to happen in the family of God that is exposed when Jesus comes, that is going to reveal that these things we're talking about, but that it's not, that God is the centerpiece of worship. And because we worship him rightly, intimacy is born amongst all of us, because nobody has to be worshiped and all of us can be intimate. Most of our intimacy issues are born from pride, which is just another way of saying wanting to be worshipped. Fear is typically, in my mind, a breakout of pride, because it's a fear of what? Something I'm going to lose, something I want, something I look like, and so we have
adultery.
This idolatrous heart to be worshipped, or to worship
Idolize,
something, and that's when we don't have the right focus of worship, there can be no true intimacy in its ultimate sense. And I think that's why Christianity should be the center place, and is the center place of the most intimate relationships that have ever been seen. So, I mean, we'll have to close this up at this point.
Yeah,
We've got
I did remember my question, though.
So.
I remember what the question was from last week. We can save it for next week, or we can talk about it.
No, we're going to keep going. Let's hit the questions now.
Right.
So we'll close up on that subject.
So if any of what
that.
we said was really over your head, or really out there, or a little too esoteric,
we would never be
abstract,
esoteric.
Send in your grounded, pragmatic questions to this part of the community and see if we can ground them for you.
And just say, we want Brent back. He makes things simple. So,
or Teresa.
Yeah, she just makes things understandable.
The question I had came from potluck. We were sitting around talking about worship, and these people said it's okay for me to ask this question, but they didn't write it down, so I'm going to try to remember it the best I can. So if I don't remember exactly, forgive me, give me some grace. But they are participants in our worship band, and they were concerned about certain lyrics, and I know that you're way more into being a musician than I am, and so I wanted to hear your comments on this question. The question was really like they came across some lyrics in some songs that they had a hard time seeing. Well, what do I do? You know, if I were a congregant member in the church and I hear a lyric, I can not sing it or sing a different lyric. But what do I do if I'm a worship person and I'm leading worship or playing in the band, when I come across a lyric that I think theologically I have a problem with? And one of the lyrics was reckless, God's love is reckless. And the other one was just kind of the lyric about mad God being madly in love with them for a male. And that seemed inappropriate kind of love, in the sense of it felt more romantic love, and the notions of romantic love entering into worship songs. So those are the two questions. I thought, well, I would rather have Greg answer those questions, but here's my answer, but I'd rather hear him, since he's played in this world a lot longer than I have.
I think, first of all, it's always appropriate that if you have a question on a lyric to address our worship leaders.
Which they did, and I thought that's cool, because we have a pretty good... I go down and speak and hang out with the bandies, because I'm a drama guy and they're similar enough.
Artsies.
And they like to talk things out and share their differences. I like the guys. I like our worship group.
Matt and David are both really theologically astute. Especially Matt, and I really appreciate
David.
I really appreciate when they dive into it, and they'll get into it. They may even say like, it's...
Or say, okay, you don't have to sing this one. I have a different conviction. So, they'll work it out, is what I'm not worried about at all. But And neither was this person, really.
Right. And so basically, I would
people.
always, first I'd advise, if it's really a matter of conscience because you've tried to work it out in your head and you can't feel it, just don't sing it. Just move past that lyric and move into the
Do you
parts.
recuse yourself from that worship song? Do you have
No, I
some-
recuse myself from those lines. I don't think the total, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. When there's a truth, sing the truth. When there is something that you celebrate truth. I don't think chew up the bones and or chew up the meat and spit out the bones. There it is. Unless I'm a dog.
Yeah.
But and I think that it's important to remember that we don't need to treat worship music like scripture. Worship music is not scripture. It's not infallible. You've never sang an infallible song. There's always I don't know a song I couldn't probably find something wrong with at some level, except the ones I write.
Yeah, those are the nice ones.
Because I understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I may be saying it
yeah.
wrong.
Well, there's also this, and that's the other part of the conversation that I was having with them. It's about, there's this open subjectivity that could be allowed, even though there's some objectivity to the way you hear it. So like, you hear a lyric, or the songwriter had an intent for that lyric, but you hear it differently than he intended, or he didn't word it the right way and it came out weird. Those are two options. But I can hear one lyric and think from my past that it means this, and you, when you wrote it, may not even be thinking that way at all.
Let's take the most famous worship song in the world, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. It's not a sound. Grace isn't a sound. Like, what are you talking about?
You're trying to preach a lie.
The preaching of the, or even more importantly is, I'm not a wretch. I'm a sinner, but that's destroying the image of God. You're not going to, whatever. You could have people. So what are you talking about? Is there never a time I didn't really, can I sing that verse? Because when was I blind? Like, when was I a wretch? I was a good kid. I didn't do anything really wrong. Yeah, I know I'm a sinner because I'm not perfect, but a wretch, I would never put myself, we're talking about a guy who ran a slave boat. It's like, yeah, of course he's going to say he's a wretch. You can take any song, pick it apart, and put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Then how do you determine between that, when that's happening, and when it is literally just theologically wrong?
Well, I think there are, like, when you're applying the Father died on the cross.
Yeah.
Like, no, that didn't happen. There's no way to square that circle. For example, the Reckless Love one. I've heard this objection before. The difficulty is that music is not, you have to ask, what is the perspective of the music? So music comes from two perspectives, or three perspectives at times. It comes from the perspective of God. Your typical old school hymns will proclaim the wonders and the beauties and the majesty of God, his attributes, his actions, his works. And you'll sing about those things without reference to self. Then there's the corporate worship, where it's the ours, the us, the we, and that's been a traditional way of representing in music the corporate worship setting. And so that there's that perspective that we're talking from the us to God. And then there's the individual, which is I'm talking from the me to God. Now, I think the Reckless Love song is actually coming from an individual human perspective to God. And so when you talk about he leaves the 99 to go after the one, I think what the attempt of the attempt in the song is to say that is not the safe thing to do. It's not safe to leave the flock to go after the one. It's not safe to abandon heaven to come down to this soiled, sinful earth and die. That's a little reckless, and it actually does come from a sermon concept that was out there for a little while, and the way when I heard the guy explain his song, he was basically trying to say, look, this is from our perspective. Like, this does look reckless. Like, why would God do this recklessly? This doesn't make sense. To God, it's not reckless at all. To God, it makes complete sense. To God, who knows everything, he's got it all put together. But there are cases of his love, like his son dying on a cross to bear our sins. And it's like, well, that's not reckless. He knew the end. He knew what he was doing. He's putting himself under Satan's hands. He's putting himself in, so from a human perspective, you could say it was reckless. It looks reckless. Now, whether you can affirm that or not, because you're like, I just don't agree. I don't think God does anything recklessly.
This is an artistic interpretation.
Right. It is an attempt to get at the emotion, at an emotive state of which I am like totally confused, God, that you would love me in this way that seems like you're just putting it all out there. You're not even stopping. You're not. This seems. It looks
it's a
to
metaphoric recklessness.
It's like C.S. Lewis said. God is, God's Aslan's not a tame lion. Well, what did he mean? He's saying that God's wild. He means that he's not tamed by human standards. Not that he can't control himself, and yet that you could use the accusation that he's saying he can't control himself. He's wild. He's out of control.
Also there's like
no, he's out of our control.
Yeah, a part of it is too just this idea that there are some songs that lend themselves to making you think. And one way you can look at it to me is, for God, it's not reckless, but it appears reckless to me, because if I were God, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
Right is really what you're saying, but you have to add that to the song to have it meaning. If that's too hard for you and you just see God's love is never reckless, I would agree with that statement, that God's love isn't without thought. Because that's how most people interpret the word reckless, right? That means without care or crass or kind of.
I think without care would. It seems like it's without care. It seems like man,
and
you're
that's
just
the opposite of
care
what
to himself. Is what it is. And Jesus' love was without care to himself.
Yeah, it was.
That would be reckless.
Selflessly reckless would be.
So,
I guess.
Yeah, it's
again.
You
see what I'm saying? But I
interesting.
like these conversations because art
should provoke.
Art is supposed to provoke you, and you're supposed to think about it. And I think we consume too much of the music that we hear, that we don't do enough thought. I mean, I also think the opposite can be true. I think, coming from seeing people who are friends of the high church, there's only certain songs you can sing that are really theologically correct, whether they're good or not. And I don't mean good quality in the way that they're sung or in the way that they're understood by the audience. So I just like to bring this in to have those conversations.
So let's go to the next lyric that was brought up. God is madly in love with you.
Yeah.
The following. So it's like, take courage. Don't let your heart be troubled. Don't let your heart be troubled. Don't fear no evil. Not even good English.
Well,
keep your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. Take courage. Hold on. Be strong. Remember where your help comes from. I don't see that as romantic in the context of take courage. Be strong. You're in fear. Remember, God is madly in love with you. I think if you just lift the phrase out, it sounds romantic in the sense of but it is evoking a man who is so after this woman that he's taking every stance to protect her and do everything he can. And so there can be this, I do think it's an evocative language.
So because I got the lyrics, don't let your heart be troubled, hold your head up high, don't fear no evil, fix your eyes on the one true, God is madly in love with you, take courage, hold on, be strong, remember where your help comes from. And then it talks about Jesus, our salvation, redemption, and his blood, light in heaven, friend forever. So there is a friendship comment.
I mean, this is really one of those songs that's like super poetic, where it's like, hey, we just link a bunch of things together.
Yeah, so, well, I struggle with mixed metaphors in music. That's the thing that I'm like, nope, that makes no sense.
That's art. Art mixes metaphors.
It has to be. It's art, definitely, but I don't know if it's good. But that's a different conversation.
Double entendre art is.
But
is
I do.
tough.
I don't know if this particular song, in its metaphor, because I do struggle with God is madly in love with you. It's the you part that I struggle with. This is going to sound really nerdy, but is that plural you? If it's plural you, I'm fine. If it's me, you, and it's not a romantic love, then I'm okay with it as well. I'm not okay with romantic love notions towards me.
I fell in love with this song when I would sing it at youth ministry to the students, because they were scared. We had just gotten out of COVID. They just lost their youth pastor. And my whole thing while I sang that song was, don't let your heart be troubled.
Which is
don't
scriptural.
Fear evil right now. Keep your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. God is so overwhelmingly in love with you. I don't think that's an inappropriate statement. I think you import romance,
romantic, and maybe even sexual connotations to the song.
That we've been doing that for centuries with the Song of Solomon. That is supposed to be the picture of
the bride.
And so and it is a corporate. You sing it to the corporate.
Yeah. Part of the problem I have is not this song actually, because of the rest of the lyrics. So if that phrase in a song is sticking out at you, go back and look at the lyrics, and then you'll see if the sentiment of the full song.
I don't like is "He Loves Us." Like Brent loves this song.
Yeah,
but I'm not into.
And it's not the part that
sloppy
says
wet
he loves
kiss.
us.
I'm not into the metaphors to me, like when heaven meets earth, like a sloppy wet kiss. I'm just like.
Well, I don't know how that happens. Again, I don't like mixed metaphors.
That doesn't even connotate the idea of the incarnation.
It's like magnet poetry to me.
And
you just put the words together.
And I get, again, it's an evocative. I could go through the same machinations of evocative language and stuff like that. But to me, there's when you have opportunity to use another more precise concept, I would go with a more precise concept. When it comes to worship music.
Yeah, I think when it comes to art, you can be so precise it's not artistic. You can be so open-minded that it has no value or meaning, or it can have any meaning. And those are the two cautions. You need to not just provoke an emotive response, but also draw them to a truth of some kind. And to me, music needs to do both of those things. And some things can be evocative if they're evocative towards a truth. And that truth has got to be clear. But it doesn't have to be like every part of your song has to have a verse reference or something really odd like that.
Yeah, no, I think that that's what's difficult about
and it needs to be good
music.
It needs to be written well, I should say.
And I think that like with the "Madly in Love with You" part of the song,
that's the only line in that whole song that I would say is the one that's ambiguous.
But even then, I don't necessarily think it's ambiguous in the sense that ask yourself, is it true? Do you really not believe that God? Unless you're like a Calvinist who believes that God only loves the elect, and therefore he might not be madly in love with you.
Would you say you were madly in love with your children?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then it would be appropriate. And if you think of madly in love as only romantic, then that would be a hang-up that you have with the song, right? I don't know if the song is trying to say that. And that's why I'm okay with this particular song.
Yeah. I think
but there are other songs
there are plenty of songs
that sound like a love song to me.
And we try to, and I give it to David, I give it to Matt. They try their best to like go, that song's garbage. We're not going there.
Well, I just want people to know how much diligence goes into our worship team picking songs. They're not just picking
thinking about it.
They're thinking about it. They're processing it. They don't just, well, this is cool on the radio. Let's play this. They're thinking about the theology of the music that we're playing here on Sunday.
And if they're not, I am.
Yeah, and I value that about our church. So it sounds complicated, but I want you to know the process that we kind of go through internally when we think through a song.
I have an angst right now. I'm my heart's longing to get back to some of the more like focused on God's attributes songs, like "Holy, You Are Holy." You know, that kind of. Oh, let's get back to talking about God to God. I love that. You know, because we've moved so far to the existential emotive. I think you have to balance it back with the objective theological, or the existential emotive turns into just pure emotive and doesn't have the grounding of the existential. And so, but that's my own, the grounding of the objective, but that's my own esoteric way of saying that so nobody understood anything I just said. So that's
no, but
fun for me.
I like songs that provoke emotion, but I want my emotion to be something safe. And that's because of my background as well. I come from a place that people lulled your kind of emotions and then taught you bad theology. And the song can make you feel a certain way because it's trying to lower your guard.
And I love thick theology with powerful emotion.
Yeah, and
like
that's
my
why there's
favorite.
the one about the Trinity is one of the favorite worship song. I don't care the name, but
it's King of Kings.
Yeah, and so because I feel like I'm also expressing my feelings, but also it's true. Like everything I'm saying is like rooted in truth.
It's practically you're singing the creed. Yeah,
you're almost singing a creed, but also it's structured well. It sounds well. It emotes emotion through the reaction of the arrangement of the music. Yeah.
So, okay, we have one more question, and I do want to get into this, but because I think it would be, I think you and I can go nerdy, and then we can let Brent kind of take us back down next week, but let's just take a minute on it, because it's really a cool question and interesting to me, so let's try it. Go ahead. Do you have it?
Oh, let me grab it.
I'll read it.
You have it ready, available?
Yeah. So the question came to us about, it comes from Linda Thompson, and she was just asking us, okay, Francis Chan just recently came out in a particular podcast where he was explaining that he kind of believes that the elements of communion are a sacrament, which that's a different conversation than the belief that they transform into the body and blood of Christ. That's the quote unquote. She mentions she doesn't feel like it's a basic salvation issue for her, and it's not a basic salvation issue. It isn't. But the question is how should we view this? Is it a symbol? Is it actually transformed? What are we looking at here? Is it just like reminder? It's like the remembrance. That's as we would call it in the Baptist world, an ordinance, something you do because the church has been ordered to do it. It's a way of ordering reality. Or is it a sacrament, something that's sacred and holy, and as a Catholic would denote, it bestows a certain level of grace? Then you've got the Presbyterians who would say, no, it doesn't. It bestows a level of faith in the sense that you bring your faith to it and it magnifies your faith. It's a faith growing experience. So it's not called an ordinance in the Presbyterian, the Anglican Church, these kinds of places. The Presbyterians would say this is not transforming. It's not consubstantiation, which are these terms, right? Transubstantiation is the Catholic view that the bread and the wine actually turn into literally the body and the blood of Christ. Consubstantiation, or real presence, is the idea of the Lutherans that would argue, no, it's truly the body and blood of Christ, but it's underneath the elements.
And they would call it a sacrament.
Yeah, and they call it a sacrament. Presbyterians call it a sacrament, but they say it's because when you bring your faith to the object, it bestows upon you the grace of your faith, in the sense that you're coming to it not as just bread and juice or bread and wine. You're coming to it as in faith that what Christ has given you is what it is. And then you've got the ordinance level, which is this doesn't give any grace or anything. This is about us remembering Jesus. It's a worship, a celebration of worship, a focus, and it's a symbol, almost wooden literal rudimentary concept on symbol. And so we at the church, we hold to the symbolic viewpoint. However, I lean more with the Presbyterians. I do think that there is something going on when we approach communion, that you are actually engaging with. It's not just the Lord's Supper, just that's it. I mean, I don't think it's not that. I do think it is that. I just think that when I come with my faith to these objects of bread and juice or wine, depending on where you're at, that there is something greater going on than me snacking on a Ritz cracker and having a little box juice. Like, there's something different. So I'll let you fire off first, and then I'll kind of go into the nerd part for a second.
When it comes to the thing about that people argue over is we live in a world that likes to. It's almost like a deconstruction world. We like to tear everything down to its component elements, define every aspect of it, and then kind of leave it there. And I think throughout church history, you have different people responding to what it is differently. And so if you're arguing theology against Catholics, then yes, there would be some really big differences in the way that we view it, because they're using this as an essential part of, in order to be saved, you have to have these sacraments in order to continue in the grace. And that's very theologically different than the way I would look at it.
Linda, that may be why that's bothering you. You're hearing a guy that you love, that he's a good Protestant preacher, saying things that sound like he's saying, oh no, there's other ways of grace. I don't think Francis Chan would argue that that's a re-sacrifice of Jesus. I didn't watch the whole podcast.
Or unnecessary to continue in your salvation.
Right. I do think he's just trying to get back to like, there's something going on here.
And what you're following in a lot of people's modern thoughts on rethinking through what they personally feel about that is the kind of early church's views. So it started with the one that God made, and that's the one that we know is true. And then there's the Roman Catholic one that everybody's like, well, this seems kind of off. And then we have the Lutheran one, which is like, well, we know we didn't like that, but we kind of like some of it, and we don't like some of it, so we're going to call it consubstantiation. And it has some value, but it's not necessary in the way the Catholics are. And so what you're doing is...
It's not a re-sacrifice.
And then we come down to the modern era that doesn't know what a symbol is, and we're just like, well, it's a symbol. And then people go, well, I just drink it, and then I'm told that's what I do because that's what we do at church. And so that has... You've got everything from so necessary to your salvation that if you don't take it, you don't continue in your salvation, to, and you can do it or not do it, but it's really, you're already saved, so it's no big deal. So both of those are really bad in my opinion, positions to be in. And so a lot of people have looked back and they want to give it spiritual value and it's not a tic tac and a shot.
Soda. Yeah.
It's not a tic tac and a shot. And that's the way I think our consumption worldview really takes most symbols as.
So, like,
and
I'll
in
give
the
you an
past,
example.
symbols have more meaning
And
than they do now.
It really upset me, and I still don't quite know what to do with it. But when we would do communion online during COVID, I heard people go like, "Oh yeah, man, I grabbed some Cheerios and a soda, and I had communion." And I'm that wasn't communion.
Yeah,
you didn't actually have the Lord's Supper. You didn't engage it, and here's why. Because what's the difference. And this, I'm going to try to help you with the concept of symbolism. In fact, let's just take the word out.
And that's what we're struggling with, I think, just to clarify my points before you get to yours. It's just that we are struggling in the modern world with what is the meaning of a symbol? What's its value? How do we look at it? Is it just a thing you can and can't do?
It's something you hit with a drumstick.
It's just a pretty piece of art that's just a nice thought experiment. It's not any of those things, and it is not less than those things. So go ahead.
So two approaches to the concept of symbol. First is, let's give you an example. If I take a piece of wood and I shove it vertically in the ground, I take another piece of wood and it's shorter and I shove it onto the top, what do I got?
You have a cross?
I got
or
two
you've
pieces
got a
of wood.
T?
I got a T, but it could... Now, if I brought it down a little bit, right, I got a cross.
Yeah.
Well, guess
what?
what?
A lowercase 2.
It's now a symbol because of what Jesus did on the cross. It used to be a symbol. It used to be a symbol of when you saw it, you would shudder because it was a symbol of Roman power, torture, and just it was a
symbol of the Romans' ability to control rule law.
Yeah, right. And now it's a picture of freedom, a picture of faith and salvation and removal of sin. I mean, why didn't the stone be like a round stone where that got rolled away? Why didn't that become the symbol? Like if I wore a little circle, nobody would think of it as a symbol of Christianity because the cross is the symbol of Christianity. It's a symbol, meaning that it's significant. And that word's important because the word sign is in the word significant. The reason it's significant is because the object in and of itself, signs like a signpost, points to something else. It's just two pieces of wood. Sometimes I'm walking around, I'm like, oh, is that a church? And I realize, oh no, there's just cross beams reflected in the window because it's a natural structural shape.
That's why you find it in other cultures that doesn't have the same meaning.
Right. And so, but now you're like driving down and guess what? Nope, that's not a cross. That's actually a light pole. But the idea is your mind sees that and it gives it meaning. Because it points through the object, the material, to the reality, to the truth of what that thing means. It's a way to truth. In fact, that's exactly what language is. Written language are just signs. There's signs to truths that are beyond the actual physical words. This is what is going on with the bread and the juice or the wine, the grape, the whatever's from the
symbols,
blood of the grape, right? Jesus didn't just take any old bread and any old wine. He didn't grab Cheerios and the soda and go like, hey guys. No, this was already a symbol-laden event called Passover. It already has meaning, and he took the meaning and he said, just as there's a Passover lamb, just as we're eating the bitter herbs, just as we're going through the stuff, and this is this one portion of, he's saying, listen, this bread, I re-signify. I give it a new significance. When you taste this bread, it's my body. And so literally, you should not be able to eat and take communion without your mind going straight to Jesus. That's the power of the, quote, symbol. When you take the cup, you shouldn't be able to see that little cup with that juice in it and not think, oh, this is the blood, the sufferings of Jesus. This is his blood poured out. If all you're doing is sitting there as a little kid and you're like, I want a cracker. This is why I didn't let my kids eat it, because they didn't have the symbol yet.
Yeah.
It wasn't signified in their mind. They were just eating something. They were having snack. What's the difference between snack and communion? The significance of what Jesus brings into it. It's the very art of him speaking what it is that it creates it. It is his body because it signifies his body. Doesn't mean it becomes his body. This is not some literal, like silly materialistic thing. It is literally like the word. When you write it down, that's the word. No, it's not. Those are symbols pointing to what we think of the word.
The concept.
The concept, the actual
reality of the concept.
The true reality is signified in the letters.
Well, this is where we struggle in our modern world. We equate reality to materialism.
And it's not.
And it's not. Symbols are showing that there are things that aren't material that are just as real. And one of those would be love or art or the feelings that they invoke. There's an objectivity to it that isn't in the physical material, but it doesn't mean it's not real. So your affection for somebody, you don't see it. You don't process it in the sense that you can take it apart like you would a mechanic would a car, but it isn't less real than a car.
It's also what happens.
It may be more real than a car.
It's what happens in marriage.
Yeah.
You cease to be, hey, this is my girlfriend, my boyfriend. You get engaged. There's a new significance. This is my fiance. But that doesn't mean, what does a fiance mean?
Well, it's just words, man.
It's just words. That's why fiancés are like, well, we're going to get married anyway. We can sleep together. But
Yeah.
no, that's not, you're not signifying correctly the reality of what you are.
Denying the reality of your existence, or you're redefining it.
Yes.
You're saying it's not really, everyone else values fiancés, but I don't, is what you're really saying. If the fiancé is viewed a different way, then
And really, God says you are married. You are married. Marriage is when you've made the covenant and you're having sex. And so when we tear all these things apart, God, we are literally fighting reality as
Yeah.
God set it up. And so when you see that when you take something other than the bread and the juice, you're fighting the reality as Jesus set it up. It is a reality beyond the physical. It's a spiritual reality.
That's what I think. I think a lot of things are spiritual that we don't think of as spiritual. I think things like goodness, truth, love, any of the fruits of the Spirit, those are spiritual, but they're not untangible. You know, they're like, oh, they're ethereal. It's like, you know what love looks like. You kind of know what joy looks like when you see it. But it's not something I can take apart. It's not in the material world. So if I said, what's the symbol? I need to show a symbol of what that is. In marriage, it's the ring, right? It's the fact that you live in the same house and you use the phrases wife and husband, and you make a contract. The contract does have legal binding, but it doesn't really signify the truth of what the relationship's like.
In fact, I would want to argue that what we've replaced the significance of the bread and the juice is the cross. Like what we've done is because the cross was so repulsive, you couldn't look at the cross. Jesus didn't signify the cross as look. Whenever you see a cross, remember my sufferings for you. That's what we do. You can't help but look at a cross and think of that. Jesus is saying, whenever you take the bread and you take this juice in the presence of your brothers, you should think of my sufferings. Like you think of his sufferings when you look at a cross. Now, you don't get into like, oh, is that really the bread? The bread really is his body, or like taking it spiritually from him? That's not the point. The significance. The point is, it points you to the great event. It points you to the reality of the event of what Jesus has done for you. He's not been re-crucified. He's already done it. It's a reality that exists permanently fixed in the heavens because it was done in history. And you're seeing it. You're literally looking at it or tasting it, imbibing in your salvation in these symbols. So I just think we get too wooden, too literal, and we miss this world of symbol and significant sign, which is very biblical and extremely, extremely
So
potent.
how would someone do that? So for me, I've it's got to be a conscious act of my will when I'm in communion to remember what I'm doing. And the reason why I say that is because you can just flippantly look at a symbol. We do it all the time. People don't actually stop at a stop sign. You know what I mean? There's like, I don't care. And so you don't give it the value that it deserves, and that can cause problems. The same thing I think with communion. If you don't sit and think, wow, I'm very grateful, or wow, the significance of why Christ did this, he brought me into a family, you know, he wants me to be close to him, and enjoy that with a group of people, and to look at those symbols in terms of your salvation and what it means. If you don't at least have a moment of where if you just down it and move on, then I feel like, oh, I didn't respect the symbol in the way that it needs to be respected.
So I'm gonna give Francis Chan the best
the best
benefit
grace
of the doubt, in the sense that
he's exploring what that value is.
What I think, because there is something, and let's just be honest with ourselves, even as Baptists, even as Christians,
because we just don't know what symbols mean.
When you take that bread and you take that juice and it's just Welch's grape juice. And you put it into that cup, and you take that matzo, you chop it up, and you put it in a plate, and you bring it before the people. This is the same stuff. the significance is given by the very reality of what you are of what you're doing. It is now symbol. It changed. It's no longer bread. It is now symbol. It is no longer Welch's grape juice. It is symbol. And that symbol is like words. It's no longer ink on a page.
and
it's not just scribbles.
It's associated with bloodshed.
It's meaning.
Yeah, and family. So I think the closest...
It's meaning. You're looking... It's gone from meaningless
to meaningful.
to meaningful.
Yeah.
And so if there's any kind of transformation that this bread goes from bread to the body of Christ, from juice to the blood of Christ, it's that it goes from meaningless bread and meaningless juice to meaningful body.
It goes
and
from profane to
blood.
sacred.
Absolutely.
That's what the Old Testament would say. And I would say you could get this in the symbol of the flag if you're patriotic.
And in the sense that it goes from common to sacred, that it becomes a sacrament, a sacrament.
Yeah.
I would be okay if you're going to claim that somehow their grace bestowed upon you from heaven and now you're going to be more holy.
That's a theological argument.
It's a different conversation.
Just in the common Old Testament sense that you can have things that are used for common and things that you set aside to give them meaning and to express the true meaning and value of what it's pointing to.
Well, I think we could go on. Maybe we should have Brent correct our or take us.
What are you guys talking about?
What are you, man, huh? So, but if you're gonna have follow-up questions, awesome. We love it. I love this stuff. This is exciting to me. Thank you for the great question, Linda. But for the sake of already a long podcast, we are.
You're gonna ask that question. We're gonna nerd on it.
Yeah,
for a
you
while.
guys. This is us. You got the two nerds here talking. So we hope that you enjoyed this particular rabbit trail. We were glad that you joined with us. Hey, and if you have any questions for us, any follow-up or anything you want to get into, again, drop us a line at rabbittrail@obcc.church, rabbittrail@obcc.church, and just let us know, and we'll try to get back to you or dive into this. Otherwise, for the sake of our brother Brent, who is sick, pray for him. I'm going to tell you, God bless you. Boom shakalaka.
Bye.